I'm 99 years old. I've been investing for 88 years. And I'm going to tell you something that will make every financial advisor in America furious. Diversification is admission that you don't know what you're doing. People think owning 50 stocks makes them smart. They think spreading money across dozens of companies is sophisticated risk management. They're wrong. Owning 50 stocks doesn't make you smart. It makes you mediocre. It makes you average by design. If you can't understand a business well enough to put 20% of your portfolio in it, you shouldn't own it at all, period. Not 2%. Not at all. Spreading money across dozens of companies you don't understand isn't safety, it's ignorance disguised as prudence. Here's what nobody wants to hear. I built billions with a concentrated portfolio. Warren built $140 billion with a concentrated portfolio. Every wealthy investor I know who actually understands businesses has a concentrated portfolio. The only people who need 50 stocks are the ones who don't understand any of them. That's an observable pattern across 88 years. But here's the part that makes this complicated. Most people are idiots about investing. Most people should own 50 stocks through an index fund because they genuinely don't know what they're doing. That's not an insult. That's arithmetic. If you don't understand businesses deeply, concentration will destroy you. Diversification is protection from your own ignorance. And most people are ignorant about business. They've never studied a balance sheet, never read an annual report, never analyzed an industry. The real question isn't whether you should diversify. The question is, are you knowledgeable enough not to need it? Because concentration only works if you actually know what you're doing. And from 88 years of watching investors, 95% don't know what they're doing. They shouldn't concentrate. They should buy index funds. I'm going to show you 3 reasons. Diversification is for people who don't understand investing, and why concentrated portfolios only work for the disciplined few who do the work. This isn't advice to gamble. This is a challenge. Either do the work to understand businesses or admit you don't and diversify. There's no shame in either path. The shame is being ignorant, but investing like you're knowledgeable. Hit the like button if you're ready to hear why your diversified portfolio might be an admission you have no idea what you're doing, and why that might be perfectly fine. Before we get into this, do me a favor. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's here. City, state, country, just let me know. Here's why smart people, educated people with MBAs and CFAs, build portfolios with 40 to 60 stocks and never beat the market. Most people think diversification reduces risk. That's partially true. It reduces catastrophic failure risk. But it also mathematically reduces your returns to exactly average. You're guaranteeing mediocrity to avoid disaster. Diversification is not a strategy. It's admission you don't have a strategy. When you own 50 stocks, you're saying, I have no idea which will succeed, so I'll own all of them and hope winners offset losers. That's not investing, that's hoping. The truth nobody wants to hear. If you understood businesses well enough to identify the best 3 to 5 opportunities, you wouldn't need 50 stocks. You'd put significant money in those 3 to 5 and ignore everything else. But most people can't identify 3 great businesses, so they buy 50 mediocre ones and call it prudent. I call it admission of ignorance, and that's okay. There's no shame in being ignorant about business analysis. Most people should buy index funds and move on. The shame is being ignorant, but pretending you're knowledgeable. You don't need to be smarter than me to succeed with concentration. What you need is 1. Willingness to study businesses until you understand them better than 99% of people. 2. Discipline to only invest when you have genuine insight. 3. Patience to wait for the right opportunity. And 4. Honesty to admit what you don't know. That's rare. That's why most should diversify. Reason number 1. Diversification dilutes your best ideas to irrelevance. The first reason diversification fails. When you own 50 stocks, you're diluting your best ideas, your genuine insights, with your worst ideas and mediocre guesses. Your best insight gets the same 2% weighting as your 50th best guess. That's not risk management. That's deliberate mediocrity. You can only deeply understand maybe 5 to 10 businesses in your entire lifetime. Maybe. The rest is surface-level knowledge. You read headlines, know brand names, understand industries at Wikipedia level. But you don't understand businesses. When you build a 50-stock portfolio, your 5 to 10 deeply understood businesses get diluted by 40 to 45 barely understood companies you own because your advisor said diversify or you needed sector exposure. None of those are good reasons. Your best idea might return 500% over 10 years, but at 2% of your portfolio, that brilliant insight only moves returns by 10%. Meanwhile, your 40th best idea loses 60%, costing 1.2%. Your best work barely matters because you diluted it with mediocrity. Financial advisors teach never put more than 5% in any single stock. Why? Because they assume you don't understand what you own. They're probably right. But that advice guarantees you'll never make exceptional returns. If your best idea is capped at 5% and returns 10 times, you need 20 home runs just to double your money. Nobody finds 20 businesses that 10 times. Let me tell you about 2 investors I watched over 30 years. Both started in 1990 with $100,000. Both mid-30s, smart, educated. One succeeded dramatically. One succeeded modestly. Investor A, Robert, engineer, made $85,000 annually. He built a diversified portfolio of 45 stocks across every sector. Spent 2 to 3 hours per year per company, reading summaries, skimming earnings, checking ratios. With 45 stocks, that's 90 to 135 hours annually. Sounds diligent, but 90 hours across 45 companies means 2 hours per company per year. Barely enough to read one annual report thoroughly. Robert never really understood anything. He knew surface details, could quote P/E ratios, could talk about holdings at cocktail parties, but didn't understand them deeply. From 1990 to 2020, 30 years, Robert's portfolio returned 9.2% annually. His $100,000 became $1,328,000. Sounds great. Beat inflation. Most would be thrilled. Investor B, Margaret, accountant, similar income. Started with same $100,000 in 1990, but Margaret spent the entire first year studying businesses. Not 45 businesses, 3. Only 3. Read every annual report for 10 years back. Read competitor reports. Built models. Visited facilities. Spent 400-plus hours on each. After 1,200-plus hours, she understood 3 businesses better than anyone except people. Running them. Those 3? Coca-Cola, American Express, Berkshire Hathaway. In 1991, she bought them, 30% each, 10% cash. From 1991 to 2020, 29 years, Margaret's portfolio returned 15.3% annually. Her $100,000 became $6,612,000. Robert, with 45 stocks, $1,328,000. Margaret, with 3 stocks, $6,612,000. Margaret made 5 times more, $5.3 million more, because she concentrated in businesses she understood instead of diversifying across businesses she barely knew. But here's critical. Margaret could have lost everything if she'd been wrong. Her concentration was only safe because she did the work. Robert's diversification protected him from ignorance. For Robert, diversification was correct. He wasn't willing to spend 1,200 hours studying 3 businesses. This is the nuance. Diversification was right for Robert, given his knowledge. Concentration was right for Margaret, given her knowledge. The disaster is concentrating without knowledge. Let me show you the mathematics of dilution. Portfolio A, diversified, 50 stocks, 2% each. Best idea, 2%. Returns 500% over 10 years equals contributes 10% to portfolio. Second to fifth best, 8%. Average 300% equals contributes 24%. Sixth to 20th best, 30%. Average 150% equals contributes 45%. 21st to 50 stocks, 60%. Average 50% equals contributes 30%. Total return, 109% over 10 years, 7.7% annually. Portfolio B, concentrated, 5 stocks. Best idea, 25%. Returns, 500%, equals contributes 125%. Second best, 25%. Returns, 400%, equals contributes 100%. Third best, 20%. Returns, 300%, equals contributes 60%. Fourth to fifth best, 30%. Average 200% equals contributes 60%. Total return, 345% over 10 years, 16.1% annually. Same best ideas. Concentrated portfolio returns 345% versus diversified 109%. Over 30 years, $100,000 at 7.7% equals $945,000. $100,000 at 16.1% equals $9,735,000. Concentration creates $8.8 million more wealth, not because of better ideas, because best ideas weren't diluted. But this only works if you actually identify those ideas correctly. If you're wrong, concentration destroys you. That's why knowledge is prerequisite. That's why 95% should diversify. Warren and I built Berkshire through radical concentration. In the 1960s to 70s, our portfolio wasn't 50 stocks. It was 3 to 5 major positions. When we bought See's Candies in 1972, people said we were insane, too concentrated. We said we understand this business. When we bought insurance companies, they dominated our portfolio, 40 to 50% at times. When we bought Coca-Cola, we put $1.3 billion, 25% of Berkshire's portfolio, into one stock. Coca-Cola alone generated over $10 billion in dividends since 1988. If we'd limited it to 5% as prudent investors recommend, we'd have made 1/5 as much. we'd have foregone $8 billion to feel diversified. Every great investment fortune was built through concentration, not one exception. Warren didn't build $140 billion through diversification. Peter Lynch's returns came from his top 20 concentrated positions. George Soros made fortunes with massive concentrated bets. Pattern is unbroken. Concentration in knowledge builds fortunes. Diversification dilutes your best ideas to irrelevance. If you truly understand a business deeply, better than 99% of investors put serious money in it. 20%, 30%, enough that if you're right, it matters. But only if you actually understand it. If you can't explain the business to a 12-year-old, you don't understand it. If you can't predict recession performance, you don't understand it. If you haven't read 5 to 10 annual reports, you don't understand it. Most people don't understand any businesses well enough to bet 20% on them. That's reality. The disaster is concentrating without knowledge, putting 30% in a stock tip or hot technology without deep analysis. That destroys wealth. The principle: acquire deep knowledge first, then concentrate. If you won't acquire knowledge, diversify. No third option. You can't get exceptional returns without exceptional knowledge. Reason number 2. Over-diversification is diworsification. The second reason, diversification fails. Once you own more than 10 to 15 stocks you genuinely understand, you're not reducing risk. You're owning progressively worse businesses. Peter Lynch called it diworsification, making your portfolio worse by adding mediocre companies. The best investment opportunities, exceptional businesses at reasonable prices you understand deeply, are extraordinarily rare. Maybe 5 to 10 in a decade if you're skilled. Everything else ranges from average to poor. Most businesses are mediocre commodities in competitive industries with low returns. When you force yourself to own 40 to 50 stocks, you're buying number 11 through number 50 on your list, your 35th best idea, your 48th best idea. Those aren't good investments, they're mediocre businesses you own for diversification. The statistical benefit of diversification maxes out around 15 to 20 uncorrelated positions. Academic research shows 15 to 20 stocks capture 90 to 95% of available diversification benefit. Stock number 21 to 50 adds almost nothing to safety, just mediocrity. When you own 40 to 50 stocks, you can't understand them all. To really understand 50 stocks requires 2,000 hours annually, a full-time job. So you skim reports, read headlines, check metrics. You don't understand anything. You're collecting stocks, not investing. 2 investors in 2005, both $500,000, both smart professionals. One stayed in his circle of competence, one diversified beyond it. David, age 38, worked in technology 15 years. He understood tech businesses cold, identified his top 10 tech stocks: Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Salesforce, Adobe, VMware, others. Knew their products, markets, competitive advantages. But his advisor said, technology is too concentrated, need diversification across all sectors. So David did 50% tech stocks he understood, 50% in 30 stocks across sectors he didn't understand. Energy, healthcare, industrials, consumer staples. From 2005 to 2020, his tech stocks, 2,200% return, 22% annually. His other 30 stocks, 90% return, 6% annually. Total portfolio, 1,145% over 15 years. 14% annually. $500,000 became $7,300,000. Sounds great, right? But if David had put 100% in those 10 tech stocks he understood, his $500,000 would have become $17,200,000. He left $9.9 million on the table, $10 million, because he diversified into 30 stocks he didn't understand. His advisor's prudent diversification cost him $10 million in 15 years. Compared to Linda. Same situation, $500,000 in 2005. Worked in consumer brands 20 years. Understood consumer behavior, brand loyalty, retail. Identified 5 consumer companies: McDonald's, Nike, Starbucks, Costco, Home Depot. Put 20% in each. Didn't diversify into sectors she didn't understand. Linda's 5 stocks averaged 950% returns, 16.5% annually. Her $500,000 became $12,400,000. Linda made $5.1 million more than David, despite David's better opportunities. Why? She stayed in her circle of competence. She didn't diversify. Pattern I've observed 88 years. Investors who stay in their circle of competence beat those who diversify beyond it, even when the circle is in mediocre sectors. Knowledge concentrated beats opportunity diversified. Scenario A, concentrated in circle of competence, 10 stocks you understand. Average return, 18% annually. $500,000 over 15 years equals $6,159,000. Scenario B, diversified beyond knowledge, 10 understood, plus 30 don't. 10 stocks at 18%, 25% of portfolio, plus 30 stocks at 7%, 75% of portfolio. Blended, 9.75% annually. $500,000 over 15 years equals $2,035,000. Diversification cost, $4,124,000 over 15 years. $4 million lost by owning businesses you didn't understand. Going from 15 to 50 stocks. Risk reduction increases 4%, from 92% to 96%. Returns decrease 15%. You give up $712,000 over 20 years for 4% more safety you don't need. That's not prudent. That's expensive paranoia. From 1956 to 1969, Warren ran an investment partnership. Concentrated ruthlessly in best 5 to 8 ideas. When he found something exceptional, he put 30 to 40% into it. His returns? 29.5% annually for 13 years. Meanwhile, diversified mutual funds returned 7 to 8% annually. Same market, same time. The concentration made the difference. His advice for 60 years. Diversification is protection against ignorance. It makes very little sense for those who know what they're doing. Once you own more than 10 to 15 businesses you truly understand, you're just buying worse businesses. Every stock beyond number 15 is probably a mistake. Stop diversifying. Only own businesses you understand deeply. If that means 5 stocks, own 5. If you can't find 5 you understand deeply, buy an index fund and admit you don't know what you're doing. No shame in that. The shame is pretending you understand 40 businesses when you understand 0. There are only 2 intelligent approaches. 1. Concentration in few businesses you understand completely, or 2, diversification through index funds because you don't understand businesses. Pick one. No middle ground where you own 40 semi-understood businesses and hope. The third reason diversification fails. It eliminates the necessity of deep thought about businesses. You can buy the market without ever analyzing a business, understanding a competitive advantage, or thinking deeply. That's why most investors are lazy. Diversification enables laziness. Building a concentrated portfolio requires massive intellectual work. Read annual reports cover to cover, every page, including footnotes. Study competitors. Understand industry economics. Analyze management. Model cash flows. Think about risks. That's 100 to 200 hours per business minimum. Most people don't want that work. It's hard, boring, time-consuming, so they buy index funds and feel smart because they own the whole market. They own nothing. They understand nothing. They're passengers hoping the economy goes up. When you own 50 stocks, you can't monitor them properly. 50 companies, quarterly earnings, strategic decisions, competitive threats. That's 200 earnings reports per year, hundreds of news items. Nobody with an actual job can do that. So what happens? You read headlines, not details. You see Company X beat earnings and feel informed. You didn't read the report. Don't know why they beat. Don't know if it's sustainable. That's not monitoring. That's blissful ignorance. Diversification lets you avoid accountability. Own 50 stocks and one fails? It was only 2%. Doesn't matter. So you never learn why it failed. Never develop judgment. Never improve. Concentration forces accountability. Own 5 stocks and one fails? It matters. It hurts. You're forced to analyze what went wrong. That pain creates learning. Learning creates better decisions. Diversification protects you from painful but necessary learning. 2 lawyers in 2008, age 45, $500,000 each. Different approaches. Michael made $400,000 annually. His advisor set him up with modern diversified portfolio. 35 stocks across sectors, bonds, real estate, commodities. Total diversification. But Michael never did the work. Never read one annual report. Never studied one business. Got quarterly statements. Portfolio up 8%. Beaten the market. He'd smile, go back to law practice. He was diversified, protected, didn't need to understand anything. From 2008 to 2023, 15 years, Michael's portfolio returned 8.4% annually. His $500,000 became $1,670,000. Not bad. Beat inflation. He felt successful. Compared to Sarah, same starting point. She made a different choice. If investing seriously, actually understand what you own. Sarah took 6 months in 2008 while markets crashed and studied. Picked 5 businesses for deep analysis. Read everything, every annual report for 10 years, every filing, letter, presentation, industry analyses, competitor reports, bull cases, bear cases, built models, thought about risks. After 500-plus hours, Sarah understood 5 businesses completely. Berkshire Hathaway, Visa, MasterCard, Costco, Johnson & Johnson. Could explain their economics to a child. Knew their competitive advantages, management philosophies, why they'd thrive in 20 years. Early 2009, Sarah bought them, 20% each. Then stopped looking daily. Checked quarterly earnings, read annual reports, monitored strategic changes, but didn't trade, didn't react to volatility, didn't panic. She understood what she owned, could wait with conviction. From 2009 to 2023, 14 years, Sarah's portfolio returned 13.2% annually. Her $500,000 became $3,280,000. Michael, 35 stocks, no understanding, $1,670,000. Sarah, 5 stocks, deep understanding, $3,280,000. Sarah made $1,610,000 more, almost double. Why? She did the work Michael avoided, thought deeply, while Michael thought superficially, understood what she owned. But here's critical nuance. Michael's approach was correct for Michael. He wasn't willing to spend 500 hours studying businesses. For him, diversification delivered acceptable returns without expertise. His 8.4% return was appropriate for his engagement level. The disaster would have been Michael concentrating without doing work. 20% in 5 stocks he didn't understand based on tips or hunches. That's catastrophic. His diversification protected him from his lack of knowledge. Sarah's approach was only correct because she did the work. Without work, concentration destroys you. Pattern. Those willing to think deeply can concentrate and build fortunes. Those unwilling should diversify and accept average returns. The sin is concentrating without thinking. Scenario A. Ignorant investor. Who diversifies? 50 stocks, doesn't understand any, follows advisor recommendations, 20 hours per year on investing, gets 9% annually, $500,000 over 25 years equals $4,320,000. Outcome. Acceptable wealth for zero expertise. Scenario B. Ignorant investor. Who concentrates minus 5 stocks, doesn't understand any minus picked on, tips, headlines, hunches, 60% chance catastrophic failure, expected value, approximately $1,800,000. Outcome, probable disaster scenario. C. Knowledgeable investor, who concentrates 5 stocks, deeply understands each, 100-plus hours study per business, 500-plus hours annually, gets 14% annually from superior selection minus $500,000 over 25 years equals $12,858,000 minus outcome. Exceptional wealth. For ignorant, A, $4.3 million diversified, beats B, $1.8 million concentrated. Diversification wins, protects against ignorance. For knowledgeable, C, $12.9 million concentrated, beats A, $4.3 million diversified by 3 times. Concentration wins. Knowledge creates returns. The question, are you ignorant or knowledgeable? Most lie to themselves. Think they're knowledgeable when they're ignorant. Concentrate based on ignorance and lose money. Be honest. Spent 500-plus hours in past years studying businesses? No? Then you're ignorant. Diversify. No shame. Ignorance is default for 95% of people. The brutal truth, if you haven't spent 100 hours deeply studying a business, reading every annual report for a decade, analyzing competitors, understanding industry economics, you don't understand it well enough to bet 20% on it. Your understanding is surface-level headline reading. That's dangerous ignorance disguised as research. I've spent 88 years studying businesses deeply, not casually following headlines. Studying with doctoral thesis intensity, hundreds of hours per business, thousands annually, reading annual reports from 20 years back, understanding industry economics at a level that lets me predict competitor behavior, analyzing competitive advantages so deeply I can determine which are durable. That work, grinding, boring, difficult work most won't do, allowed me to concentrate capital safely. When I invested in See's Candies in 1972, I understood that business better than anyone except people running it. When we bought Coca-Cola in 1988, I knew more about branded beverage economics than 99.9% of investors. That knowledge made $1.3 billion concentrated bet prudent, not reckless. If I'd been lazy, just read headlines instead of annual reports, same bet would have been gambling. Concentration was only wise because of knowledge underneath. Knowledge came from work. Most people won't do it. That's why most should diversify. Diversification eliminates the need to think. For 95% who won't do that thinking, elimination is valuable, protects them from themselves. They should diversify through index funds, never pick individual stocks, get on with lives. For 5% willing to do the work, hundreds of hours studying, thinking deeply for years, reading every page of annual reports, concentration makes them far wealthier. But only if they actually do the work. Not if they think they did by reading headlines. Only if they truly, deeply understand what they own. The sin isn't diversification or concentration. It's self-deception about competence. People who haven't done work thinking they have. People who spent 10 hours thinking they understand a business requiring 100 hours. Here's the uncomfortable question. Can you explain each business you own, competitive advantage, economics, risks, management, to a 12-year-old with clarity? If no, you don't understand it, shouldn't own it, concentrate it, should own only through broad diversification where lack of understanding doesn't matter. The principle, be honest about expertise level. If you have none, diversify broadly. If you have genuine deep expertise, concentrate in what you understand. If unsure, you don't have expertise, diversify. I learned this from Benjamin Graham, who taught me at Columbia and employed me. Let me tell you about him because his journey explains when to diversify versus concentrate. Graham lived through the 1929 crash. He wasn't an observer. He was a victim. He'd built successful investment partnerships, made excellent returns, became wealthy. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He used leverage, borrowed money to amplify returns. When 1929 crashed, he lost almost everything. Not because his analysis was wrong, because leverage forced him to sell at the bottom. His concentrated portfolio, amplified by debt, destroyed him despite being right long-term. He spent the 1930s rebuilding from nothing, but never forgot. Fixed costs, whether debt or expensive lifestyle, are the enemy of concentration. If you concentrate, you need zero leverage and low fixed costs. Otherwise, volatility destroys you even when right. In 1950, when I was his student, Graham distinguished between two investor types. The first type is the defensive investor. Doesn't know what they're doing. Might be smart in other areas, brilliant doctors, successful lawyers, but don't understand business analysis. Don't want to spend 500 hours per year studying companies. For the defensive investor, complete diversification is correct. Expect market average returns minus fees. You're buying protection from ignorance. That protection is valuable. The second type is the enterprising investor. Has done the work, studied businesses for hundreds of hours, understands competitive advantages, industry economics, management, valuation, has genuine insights most investors lack. For the enterprising investor, concentration in best ideas is correct. Expect better than market returns from superior knowledge. Then Graham said, "What changed my life? The mortal sin isn't being a defensive investor. The sin is being a defensive investor who thinks they're enterprising. Being ignorant isn't shameful. Everyone starts ignorant. Pretending you're not ignorant when you are, that's the path to ruin." I asked him, "How do you know if you're truly enterprising or just defensive in denial?" Graham said, "Simple test. Can you write a 50-page analysis of the business, competitive position, economics, risks, management, future, without looking anything up right now from memory? If yes, you understand it well enough to bet 20% of wealth on it. If no, you don't understand it. Most people can't write 50 pages from memory about any business, including ones they work at. That's fine. They should diversify. The disaster is when they concentrate anyway." That conversation in 1951, I was 21, shaped every investment decision for 73 years. The question I ask before every concentrated investment: could I write 50 pages about this from memory right now? If no, I don't concentrate. If yes, I bet big, because I genuinely understand what I own. Most investors never ask this. They own 50 stocks they couldn't write 5 pages about, or own 5 stocks they couldn't write 50 pages about and think they're intelligent, concentrated investors. They're not. They're gamblers with better odds than casinos. Graham also said, "Diversification is admission. You don't have an edge. If you don't have an edge, admission is appropriate. The fool is the person without an edge who pretends they have one." That framework, defensive versus enterprising, knowledge-based concentration versus ignorance-based diversification, honest self-assessment, has guided me 88 years. It's the only framework that matters. Let me make this simple. 3 reasons diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing. Reason number 1, diversification dilutes your best ideas. When you own 50 stocks, your best insight gets drowned by mediocre guesses. The concentrated investor who deeply understands 5 businesses will destroy the diversified investor who barely knows 50, but only if they actually understand those 5. Reason number 2, over-diversification is diversification. Stocks numbers 11 to 50 aren't reducing risk. They're adding mediocre businesses that drag returns. Diversification benefit maxes out at 15 to 20 stocks. Everything beyond makes you poorer without making you safer. Reason number 3, diversification eliminates the need to think. You can own the whole market without understanding a single business. Fine for people who don't want to do the work. But if willing to study businesses deeply, concentration makes you far wealthier over decades. These principles only work if you do the work. If you don't understand businesses, diversify. If you do, concentrate. The sin is being ignorant but acting like you're knowledgeable. Here's your challenge. Answer honestly. Can you name the CEO of every company you own? Explain each company's competitive advantage. Estimate their cash flows for next 5 years. Explain why they'll exist in 20 years. If you answered no to any of those about any stock you own, you shouldn't own it. Sell it right now. You don't understand it well enough to own it. Then take what's left. If you can only explain 5 stocks, concentrate in those 5. Put 20% in each. If you can't explain any stocks, buy an index fund and stop pretending you're an investor. No shame in admitting you don't know what you're doing. The shame is pretending. Most of you won't do this. You'll keep your 40-stock portfolio because it feels safe. You'll keep owning businesses you don't understand because your advisor said diversify. You'll keep getting average returns while thinking you're investing, and you'll wonder why you never get rich from the market. Meanwhile, the few who do the work, who study businesses until they understand them completely, will concentrate in their best ideas and build fortunes. Not because they're smarter, because they're honest about what they know and what they don't. I'm 99 years old. I built billions through concentration in businesses I understood completely. I passed on thousands of opportunities I didn't understand. That patience and discipline, only investing when I had genuine knowledge, made me wealthy. The formula is simple. Study businesses until you understand them completely. Invest only in businesses you understand. Concentrate your money in your best ideas. Ignore everything else. That's it. But almost nobody will follow it because it requires admitting what you don't know and doing years of unglamorous work. Your choice? Stay diversified and accept average returns forever, or do the work to understand businesses well enough to concentrate. Most will choose diversification because it's easier. The few who choose concentration and do the work will build fortunes. I know what actually creates wealth. Do you have the discipline to pursue it? Now, if you want more brutal honesty about investing, timeless principles that actually work instead of financial advisor garbage designed to keep you average, subscribe to this channel. We don't promise easy. We don't promise comfortable. We promise truth. And the truth is that diversification is protection from ignorance. If you're ignorant, you need it. If you're not, it's making you poor. Your choice.